Morning.
Good morning, sir.
How are you this morning?
Thank you very much for receiving.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity of meeting. Wow, yeah.
Goodbye.
Very well. Well done.
Vale.
Your Royal Highness, it is in this moment in Chechnya, one ceasefire. The war is finished in Sarajevo, and in Iraq, begin another time. That signifies the Occident has rigorously war to the Muslim people. We are coming back to the time Crusades, I say, the religious war.
I'm very worried that the Occidental approach to oil, and let's look at the situation in Iraq, the Occidental approach to Islam in Europe, and let us look at Yugoslavia, and the Occidental approach to human rights and autonomy, let us look at the context of Chechnya, is an approach which is selective. And culturally, I think that, yes, there is a Western insistence today on zones of influence, whether related to oil on the one hand, 600,000 barrels, of course, of Iraqi oil on the market would clearly impact the price of oil, which is very attractive today as a result of the recent escalation in Iraq. But as far as Yugoslavia is concerned, there is no oil, and so you see some progress towards dialogue. I'm worried that there is no overall strategic approach, and clearly the West is divided between Europe, the United States, and Russia in the context of not only the Security Council, but also in the context of its Asian responsibilities of how to proceed in dealing with Islam as opposed to Islamic activism.
The last military offensive against Iraq, will it bring the end of Saddam?
I think that the escalation after 6 years of the continued starvation, the United Nations figures today speak in human terms of 10,000 children mortality a month. When you speak of starvation and ill health, whether it's the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Health Organization, or other independent reporting on the humanitarian situation in Iraq, has just not impacted the international consciousness. And consequently, to see this movement in the last 2 weeks, obviously, we all want to see an end to misery. We all want to see an opening up of Iraq to the international community. We all want to see an end of the state of siege, which might be one of the reasons for the autocratic methods exercised in Baghdad today. Tuesday, we have a dateline, according to CNN. The new bombardment, if that is what is to be chosen, may resume. The Iraqi press are talking about the need for dialogue. There may be back channels, I don't know. But the main thing to bear in mind is that the future of Iraq should be a future where a decentralized governmental approach maintains the territorial integrity, participation of Arabs, whether Shia or Sunni, or Kurds, in a state which represents a stable contributor to regional security. If it can apply in Yugoslavia, I wonder why it can't apply in Iraq, and I think people are seeing the double standards.
This time, Saddam Hussein did not violate the 688 resolution of the United Nations. Why the Pentagon used this excuse, and why they say that he has missiles when there is evidence that it is not true?
You're quite right in saying that not only did it not violate 688, but clearly in northern Iraq, there were factions who were supported by outside forces carrying weapons, and it appears that the action was also in some way to guarantee the minimal interference from the neighbors of Iraq. And I think that the question of the use of weapons in the south poses the dilemma. Is the south important because of oil? Is the south important as an alternative target for the military planners? I think the feeling here is, in the Arab street, that oil is ultimately the concern. And as far as the region is concerned, dual containment, whether of Iraq or of Iran, has failed because clearly both countries continue to exercise policies beyond their borders, in fact beyond their borders. So the question is, can there not be a clear indication to Iraq, to Iran possibly, next year's enemy, if we speak about the Reds under the bed? We're no longer talking about communism today, we're talking about the next target, Islamic extremism, as it is seen in many countries in the West, to go back to your first question. Can there not be a clear indication of a regional security order? OSCE is active in Chechnya. OSCE is active along with NATO in Yugoslavia. Why can't the oil issue be addressed in the broader context of the larger Gulf, the stability of the larger Gulf? I think that the reaction, as the Americans are saying, is disproportionate, and they don't mind it being disproportionate. They're announcing that it is disproportionate. And clearly it begs the ultimate question, not the future of Iraq, but the future of the region so vital to international oil interests. What happens next, of course, in terms of international legality and Security Council resolutions, nobody can judge, but clearly the Security Council and the United Nations have to a very large extent been marginalized.
Some days ago you have had a very hard declaration about the United States policy. That indicates a deterioration in relations between Jordan and United States?
Well, if we are talking about democratic policies of the United States, then clearly foreign policy should also be democratic in terms of our exchanges. Of course, we are not constituents of the United States during the coming elections, nor are you. But as far as we are concerned, we are living in the region. We have to live with the consequences of military action. Since 1991, we have hoped and yearned for a regional consensus. It has not come about, which could be supported by the international community for stabilizing the region in terms of a security identity, an economic identity, a cultural identity. However, 6 years have passed, and as I said, thousands, almost 1 million children have died, according to United Nations figures again. And our criticism was basically of the fact that the consultation that took place in the Security Council did not lead to consensus, nor did it lead to consensus with many of the European countries interested in this part of the world. The Arab League was divided. And our fear was that rather than containing the image of Saddam Hussein in the international community, there has been a new lease of publicity for the regime in Baghdad. And I think that it should be made very clear that our criticism came of the fact that the use of a blunt instrument without a clearly defined strategy, where do we go in this Middle East region, with goals such as the goals that Holbrooke is enunciating in Yugoslavia, in the former Yugoslavia, in Bosnia. Will there be respect for decentralization? Will there be respect for pluralism? Is it even requested by the international community? How do we rehabilitate the Middle East region? None of this is discussed. And you see this massive response, and next week possibly another massive response. We live in a world where military action is almost scheduled into the week's program. Next Tuesday we will have another massive response possibly against Iraq. People are not foolish. People in this region have suffered eliticide, the movement of a whole elite out of the region, and yet many thinking people, Iraqis and Arabs, both in the region and in the diaspora, and particularly in the United States, are deeply concerned over what future policies exercised by the military superpower of the United States, the economic superpowers, Japan and Germany, are going to mean for the future of this region and of the world.
Your brother, the King Hussein, has more patience with American improvisations than you. To what extent do you think that Jordan is suffering economically for the catastrophic condition in Iraq?
Well, I think that His Majesty has always shown statesmanship, and I think it is my role maybe in terms of association with some of the economic challenges and the economic development perspectives over the past 2 decades to say what I said in Newsweek in November of 1990. It should not be expected of a country that neighbors a sanctioned country, as with the countries that neighbor the former Yugoslavia, to commit economic suicide simply by virtue of the fact that a war has taken place and international sanctions have been exercised on that neighbor. As far as we are concerned, the peace dividend with Israel has not yet developed the momentum that we would like to see in terms of free trade, in terms of an investment climate. In terms of the Gulf countries, clearly, despite the goodwill that has been generated in recent years, I think that the sadness is that in the Gulf we find a market which is beginning to diversify from oil, but which as yet has no interdependent relationship with the hinterland of countries like my own that has yet to come. So we're living a transition, in addition to which our own economic restructuring program, of course, has meant a difficulty for the general public over emotive issues such as the question of bread. So all in all, Iraq remained in the psyche of many the only open window for trade. However, what we would like to see is the implementation of United Nations Resolution 986, the opening up of the region for different aspects of trade, and the legitimizing of this trade with a country which regards itself as the depth for Iraq, as we indeed regard the Iraqi people as our depth, and the tremendous resources of Iraq as an input to our economy.
How are your relations with Spain, and in particular with the Premier, José María Aznar?
We have not established a dialogue with the new government yet. However, there is a residue of good relations with Spain, and particularly the personal friendship between our two monarchs and our families is well established. I would like to see culturally a greater contribution of countries of the Eastern Mediterranean to dialogue with Europe. Spain has been a champion of the Palma de Mallorca process, and I think that it is time to recognize, in terms of containing extremism, in terms of encouraging a corporate identity, an OECD for the region, that the initiatives taken form a more energetic dialogue. Unfortunately, as we well know, the Mediterranean European countries are more enthusiastic about this than their northern neighbors.
The left wing has just won the elections in Italy. Will that have any effect on the bilateral relations between Jordan and Italy?
I don't think it's a question of left and right when it comes to stabilizing the dialogue with the Middle East and the Arab countries. On the contrary, I think that there is a momentum again in Italy of trying to seek a more sensitive, more human discussion with Arab countries and with Muslim countries. And it is my hope that this discussion can be given some substance in the forthcoming European Council meetings, as well as in the context of the forthcoming European presidency.
There are rumors in Spain that the Polisario Front will go to war against Morocco. Do you think that cost of Polisario is just?
As we have said when we participated in the context of the Green March after the Sahara reverted to its Arab identity, to Moroccan identity, on more than one occasion, we do not want to talk about principles and their indivisibility. As far as we're concerned, the principle of self-determination is an indivisible principle. We can't talk about it in the context of the Palestinians and not talk about it internationally. And as far as the conflict, of course, in the context of the Sahara, we are deeply conscious of the fact that the conflict initially was one of approaches between the people of the Sahara and their aspirations for the exercise of this right with the Moroccan government. But again, unfortunately, our friends in the Moroccan Arab world tend to have the self-styled initiative of saying what is right and what is wrong in the context of Jordan, in the context of Palestine, in the context of the Eastern Arab world. But whenever we are in any way critical, even emotively critical, by saying self-determination, this creates a kind of sensitivity that maybe we can ill afford at this time.
Being a prince is a dream for most people. How do you reconcile your status with the suffering and the concern of the common man?
Well, in my case, it is often a bad dream. And in that sense, I would like to say that my major concern is with dialogue, with communication, with consensus. I believe in governance, not in government alone, but governance in the sense of a consensus between government, the legislature, the judiciary, and civic society. The common man should be represented in greater contributions of civic society. And I can't say that I can reconcile in my lifetime, because maybe this is a process. But certainly I think that openness and debate is essential to the building of democratic institutions into the next centuries.
The International Monetary Fund has obliged Jordan to leave its subsidies in electricity, energy, and wet products. How can Jordan cope with the situation?
With difficulty, I think. On the one side, our macroeconomic figures are generally good. International Monetary Fund and the World Bank applaud Jordan's reform measures. But for me, it is not a question of how do we join the international economic community, how do we apply international standards. It is the question of the pace and the timing of these measures against the background of the difficulties we've been discussing, the situation in Iraq, the peace dividend with Israel, the unexpected rise of certain products. For example, now the unexpected rise of the price of oil, the unexpected decline in the price of grain. we are a part of the world community, and yet we are not a part of the world economy in terms of signing an agreement with the European Union, which we hope to do this year, with the World Trade Organization. And I think that the process of transition over emotive issues, sensitive issues, such as the support for staple essential services, is a period, obviously, which will be exploited politically and emotively. But we do have the momentum and we do have the resilience to bridge this period. But I do think that it needs further consultation with those institutions and possibly negotiations at the institutions.
Iraq and the Kurds, Israel with the settlements, and Arafat that continue to denounce it. Is that a provocation or not?
Well, I think that as far as the settlement process is concerned, I have written for over 20 years on the subject of settlements, on the subject of the appropriation of land and the reduction of vital space for Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. And I do believe that at this time, obviously, of developing positions between the Israeli government, the new Israeli government, and the PNA, it is difficult to prejudge what their discussions will bring. But these new facts are obviously prejudging the scope of maneuver on the ground. And I'm very worried. In the next few days we'll be hosting yet again the host and donor countries of Palestinian refugees. And as you know, there are 5 provinces of Palestinian refugees, not only the West Bank and Gaza, but also Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt. I'm worried by the fact that the international community no longer talks about refugees. The Western press no longer talks about refugees. So the human content of peacemaking is seen in terms of the street in the West Bank and Gaza, which is very important. It should also be seen in terms of comprehensiveness. And there I would like to say once again that unless the basic principles of compensation or the exercise of the right of return are the principles which govern the human dimension of the Palestinian question, it is going to be very difficult to see a comprehensive process, again, with the background of what you referred to, the changes on the ground, that does make it all that much more difficult.
If at last America removes Saddam, what do you think about the person that may be replace him? Can it be a Shiite? Could be a fundamentalist?
Look, once again, Holbrooke goes to Sarajevo, and he says this process is not about secession. Today they are choosing 3 rotating heads of state, a Croat, a Bosnian, and a Serb. In the case of Iraq, unfortunately, people talk about Mr. X, who is going to be the successor, but nobody talks about the chemical formula of how that pluralism is going to be achieved. If you are asking about, do these actions promote extremism and Islamic extremism, yes, they do. They promote it in the region as a whole. And I think it's very clear that in terms of the Shia in Iraq and in the Gulf region, that they do have a potential for activism and for extremism. We see bomb explosions in different parts of the region, most recently the explosion in Saudi Arabia, which took the lives of American servicemen. And my fear is that we are almost witnessing a structuring of a confrontation between extremism in this region, which some in the West would like to call Islamic, and the desire of the military-industrial complex, particularly in the powerful countries in this world, to look for a successor to communism. I hope that this polarization does not characterize your view of this West Asian, Arab and Muslim region and does not represent the spirit of a new crusade.
How do you see the future relation between Jordan and Gulf in post-Saddam Iraq?
I think that nobody lives forever, and in that sense I can speak about post this or post that, post me maybe, I don't know. But I do want to say that as far as the interdependence between the oil-producing region and the human resource-rich countries, Japan was the only country in the OECD in 1989 in its parliament to talk about the hinterland countries. So it seems to be very clear to me that the Gulf oil-producing region should develop a concept of interdependence with its neighbors if it is going to contain the real causes of extremism in the politico-economic sense, disparity being notable among them. So I would certainly think that Jordan would do everything it can at all levels to improve relations with the oil-producing Arab world, and we would expect correspondingly a desire to work with the absolute. It's not a question of we like you today, we don't like you tomorrow. A desire to neutralize political considerations from economic realities if we are to become a region. Southeast Asia has the region, United Europe has the region, the two Americas are looking for a hemispheric cooperation. We should not remain a black hole.
Do you have any personal relations with Saddam Hussein?
The last time I saw him was in January of 1990. And, in that sense, obviously the last 6 years have not been years of dialogue. But certainly he is a phenomenon. And once again I go back and say Burma is a phenomenon, Yugoslavia is a phenomenon. You mentioned Chechnya. The accommodation of flashpoints in the world is possible in certain instances. I'm not talking about accommodation here. I think the international community has the right to reject aggression. But somehow the memory is feeble. The international community remembers the reasons for the military action and the military resolution in 1990-91. Today, somehow the reasons are a little bit confused, and clearly Saddam Hussein has chosen his timing rather well in the context of the transition in the United States.
What are the effects of the embargoes on the Iraqi people? I think you answered.
According to the United Nations figures, we are talking, as I said, of over 800,000 children who died. We are talking about the eliticide, the movement of thousands of skilled Iraqis out of Iraq, almost a mass migration. We're talking about an economy, after all, which is 98% oil-based, which means effectively that employment is extremely difficult. They are going back to an almost agrarian community. And I think it is going to be very clear that even in the best implementation of 986 and the beginning of an opening up of Iraq, they're going to be spending years, decades possibly, paying off debt. And that is the tragedy that the international community does not seem to appreciate fully, nor, for that matter, does the Iraqi leadership appreciate fully. That it is the future of these people that is going to determine the political complexion of whether it is stability or continued fragmentation, balkanization, that will color and dictate the reality of tomorrow's Middle East.
What are the conditions of investment a Kabaylat agreement, as well for the Jordan Valley development?
There is no conditionality apart from equity in terms of the participation of the signatories, Jordan and Israel in the context of Aqaba Eilat, obviously representing the center of a trade hub that should include all the countries of the Northern Red Sea. In terms of the Jordan Rift Valley, that concept of a trade hub becomes larger and possibly in conditions of peace includes the participation of Lebanon, Syria, all the riparians of water, the Palestinians, in the context of a rift which is significant, all the way to Turkey and all the way down to the Red Sea. So I think that the only condition as such is to develop a strategic view of how this region, this Jordan Rift Valley region, can contribute to an intermediation between countries in the region and between the European Union, the Western Hemisphere on the one side, and East Asia on the other, as a center for investments, a center for services, and a stabilization center for the north of the peninsula.
These three questions are in French. Minutes.
Venga, vale.
¿No? Okay.
Vale.
Tú fílmalo igual, ahora.
Ya.
Dans l'Algérie, il existe un terrorisme intégraliste et un terrorisme d'État. Qu'est-ce qui peut être la solution?
J'ai l'impression que le consensus qui était le but des réunions de Saint-Egidio est impossible, car c'est incroyable que des partis d'extérieur de l'Algérie cherchent des solutions de la part des Algériens eux-mêmes. Pour ma part, je suis membre du Forum intellectuel arabe et nos amis algériens ont parlé de temps en temps d'initiatives arabes, mais je répète que c'est essentiel que ce consensus développe en dialogue qui a commencé d'ailleurs en Algérie entre le gouvernement et les partis politiques, et d'après peut-être de chercher un appui de la part des amis, soi-disant, dans le contexte arabo-musulman. Mais pour le moment, peut-être c'est un peu mieux que c'était, je suis un observateur assez lointain, mais j'ai l'impression effectivement que c'est essentiel dans le contexte de débat occidental, européen, américain, le débat qui concerne la stabilité de la Méditerranée, d'apprécier que la souveraineté de l'Algérie et le dialogue algérien doit être authentique. Je répète, le concept de consensus doit être développé entre les Algériens eux-mêmes, sans trop de symptômes de s'en mêler dans les solutions algériennes ou de les présenter comme l'attentat de Saint-Egidio à l'époque.
Est-ce que vous avez des relations personnelles avec le président Chirac?
J'ai rencontré le président dans sa capacité d'aujourd'hui. Je l'ai rencontré comme maire de Paris. J'ai l'impression d'une compréhension très élargie de tout ce qui est arabo-musulman. Mais pour le moment, je pense que les divisions entre les pays occidentaux, l'exemple d'aujourd'hui sur la question d'Irak, donne l'impression vraiment dans cette région qu'il y a un nouvel phénomène, pas le phénomène de 90 d'un camp uni occidental, mais un phénomène des intérêts plus étroits.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la politique française dans la nouvelle situation dans le Golfe?
Je crois que c'est très important de parler de légitimité, de parler de légitimité de l'ONU. C'est très important aussi de parler des intérêts de la peuple irakien en cherchant une solution basée dans une formule de pluralisme et d'intégrité du territoire de l'Irak. Et je pense que c'est très important pour la psychologie des Arabes et des musulmans d'être rassurés que le monde occidental n'est pas monolithique sur la question de l'identité arabe. Ce n'est pas une confrontation entre l'Occident et l'Orient. Mais à la fois, je pense que c'est aussi important quand nous parlons d'une identité de région, d'une conférence de sécurité et de coopération, par exemple, à l'avenir, de trouver un certain agrément stratégique entre les pays occidentaux. Cette région a été pendant des années hors de région d'OTAN. Aujourd'hui, c'est à peu près, c'est pas périphérique, c'est presque partie de région de l'OTAN. Et je pense que ce discours doit être repris entre les Européens, les Américains et les Russes dans les mois prochains.
Est-ce que vous voyez le futur de la Jordanie?
Je crois que c'est un futur pivotal, ça doit être un futur pivotal. Nous ne sommes pas un pays transitoire, ni pour les intérêts israéliens, ni pour les intérêts syriens, irakiens. Nous sommes le profondeur des pays du Golfe, si vous voulez. Pour nous, le peuple en Irak sont notre profondeur économique et sociale dans un grand sens du mot. Et je pense qu'entre l'Israël, d'après les traités de paix, et les pays du Golfe, ce concept effectivement d'un centre de commerce et de services arabe, ce concept d'une terra media, une terre centrale, politique et sociale, soi-disant palestinienne et jordanienne, est très très important pour la stabilité de la région.
Your Royal Highness, thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Proszę,